Welcome to week 4. This week we're going to be taking a look at the outer planets as possible themes in our chart. We first started looking at our personal horoscope and the themes just within the personal horoscope. Then we branched out to our families. What were the themes in our family and how do we carry those themes? Now we're branching out even more, and that is what were the themes going on in the collective, in society at the moment you were born, and that is what these outer planets indicate. So, what you're going to be looking for in your chart is to check for any combination of Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. The combinations can be any of the major aspects. They can be conjunct, square, trine, whatever. Because where the outer planets are in your chart indicate where you are susceptible or where you're carrying issues that are going on in the society, where you're going to be affected by those in some way. For example, many of you probably were born in the 1960s, and most children born in the 60s have Uranus and Pluto conjunct to each other. I'll be talking about that one in particular as we go along because I'm sure some of you have that particular planet. That particular combination. Now we're going to talk about my grandparents, great-great-grandparents. They both, I'll tell you what was going on in their life, and then we'll look at the particulars. They both were living during the Civil War. Now, Lewis, we're going to talk about these on the next slide or two, but I just want to show you by looking at their charts. Lewis has Saturn square Uranus. Now, let me see if I can find it here. Here's Saturn, and here's Uranus. Uranus is 18 Pisces, and Saturn is 21 Sagittarius. He also has Jupiter square Neptune. And here's Jupiter at 16 Scorpio and Neptune at 14 Aquarius. In addition to those particular themes, if you look here at his sun, he has the sun conjunct Pluto, which of course is a very potent aspect to have with regard to the collective, with regard to collective issues. In addition, he has Mars in the 29th degree of Aries, and the 29th degree is an important degree. It's called an anaretic degree in astrology. And Mars, of course, rules Aries, and of course, both of those have to do with war. Now, Frances has Jupiter square Uranus. All right, her Uranus is here at 25 Aquarius. Her Jupiter is 1 Gemini. Now, that's an out of sign square, but if Uranus is, if you take that 5 more degrees, it's in Pisces. So the Pisces and Gemini square each other. So Jupiter and Uranus are square to each other. She has Saturn square Neptune. Here's Saturn and here's Neptune. That's another out of square, but it is a square. That if you back that up a degree, you're going to have Capricorn, and Capricorn and Libra square each other. In addition, like her husband, she was born with one of the outer planets conjunct to her sun. That's 15 degrees, but with the sun, many people allow that as an orb for a conjunction. In addition, she has Mercury in the middle, so Mercury is conjuncting both of those, which pulls the two outer ones together anyway. So I wanted to show you those in their charts, and now we'll talk about Lewis. Here are the aspects that I mentioned that he has. I put that one in bold because that's the one we're going to be focusing on. Because the Civil War lasted from 1861 to 1865. And the entire war, Saturn was square Uranus in Gemini. So from his birth until the war, those two planets had moved, and what they were squaring each other again, but in the sign of Gemini. And this is the thing I'm going to want you to look for, because you will often find in major events in your life that whatever outer planets were in aspect to each other at your birth, that theme will be repeated. It may be repeated in a different way. Now, he happens to have this, it's almost the same repeat, except it's in a different sign. He had Saturn square Uranus, and this is Saturn square Uranus. But it could have been Saturn opposite Uranus, sextile Uranus, or it could even have been, let's say, Uranus just coming around. If we just had Uranus in Gemini, it would have been squaring this aspect. So you have to look at all of that. But this is, of course, what he had to endure. He went to war along with his four brothers. Two were killed, and one of his brothers was injured. Now, in addition, his wife, of course, stayed home with the children. Now, here are the aspects that we talked about when we looked at her chart. And I bolded that one because what happened with her is she decided, she lived in, I think it was Lake City, South Carolina, and her family was in Greenville, South Carolina. And she decided, because they thought Sherman was coming from Charleston up along Lake City, so she was trying to escape Sherman, and she got on the train, and the train went through Columbia, South Carolina, and she happened to be in the train station the night that Sherman attacked Columbia, and Columbia burned to the ground. There's some question as to whether Sherman set fire to Columbia or not, but anyway, Columbia burned to the ground that night, and she was caught in the train station, pregnant and with two little boys with her. There are a lot of stories, of course, in the family around this. One of the most interesting is supposedly Sherman's men broke into her suitcases. She had, I think they called them valises then, and supposedly she had a bottle or several bottles of, I don't know if it was moonshine, but it was some kind of alcoholic beverage, and they broke. And she says that she sat there terrified with her little boys, watching the Sherman's men suck the alcohol out of her clothes where it had spilled. So you can see the aspect that was going on at that night or that day or that few days. Jupiter was opposing Uranus, so it's repeating this aspect, Jupiter and Uranus. It's not in the same aspect, it's a different aspect, but it is the same planets, and that's what I'm going to want you to look for. All right, these are my grandparents. You can see where I got my name, Ray. This was my mother's parents. Now, both of them, if you notice, they were born close together, so both of them have Neptune and Pluto conjunct to each other. So those are the aspects that we're going to take a look at, is that Neptune-Pluto conjunction. Okay, you can see see where I wrote down the aspects they were having, Pluto and Neptune conjunct in Gemini. So in 1934 and 1935, the banks closed in South Carolina. That was during the Depression. And he had just deposited all his money in the bank that he was going to use to buy seed for his crops that year. And so he lost everything. He lost all of his money. The story goes that my mother had just graduated from high school and she was going to go to college, and she was unable to go to college because of that. And what was going on in 1934-35 is that Neptune was squaring natal Neptune. So Neptune was in Virgo. Now here you're not repeating the aspect, but there was an aspect to the original conjunction. In other words, this original conjunction was in Gemini, and this was when Neptune had moved around to Virgo, and it was squaring this conjunction. Now, this is John Kennedy, and let's look at his natal aspects. He has Neptune and Saturn conjunct. And then, let's see, Saturn and where's Uranus and Jupiter. Here's Jupiter and Uranus are square to each other. So he has those two aspects. Here they are, Uranus square Jupiter and Saturn conjunct Neptune. Now here's a listing of the major events, or at least 3 major events in his life that I was able to find the dates for. Of course, when he was in the war, he was in a boat that sank, and he was quite a hero, saving people's lives at that point. On that date, Uranus was sextile Jupiter, so we had this same 2 planets making aspects, not the same aspect, but making an aspect with each other. And Saturn was squaring Neptune, which is the very same 2 planets, not the same aspect, but the same 2 planets. When his brother died, remember Joe Jr. was the one that was, the father was putting all his ambitions on to become a prominent politician and probably eventually the president of the United States. When he died, that whole projection fell onto John Kennedy. So this was a very, other than it even being his brother that died, it was a much more momentous moment in John Kennedy's life, because he got all that ambition from his dad kind of fell on his shoulders. And there again, we even have this aspect repeated, Uranus square Jupiter. It was probably in different signs. I didn't put the signs down there. And Saturn was square Neptune. It's a different aspect here, but the same 2 planets making aspects. And then when Kathleen, his sister, was killed, also in an airplane crash, he had Jupiter opposite Uranus. So the same 2 planets, but in a different aspect. So the outer planet themes reflect the cultural issues at the moment of your birth. And they really show where you are connected to collective issues. So when there are issues coming up in the group, in the collective, later in your life, it often reflects those aspects that you had when you were born. And then, as I said, some of you will have had this conjunction of Uranus and Pluto, which occurred in the 60s. And now, between 2012 and 2020, we have Uranus squaring Pluto. So you'll have to think about your life and what's going on now. Has there been a major event in your life during this period that would hearken back in some way to that aspect you had when you were born. So what you want to do is find the outer planet aspects in your natal chart. And as I say, most of you will have them. There may be a rare instance when somebody does not have this, but most people do. If you end up not having this, then look in one of your family's charts and see if they have it, and think about their life from this perspective. And then think about, pull up one or two of the major life events, your major life events that have really been turning points for you, and check the outer planet aspects during those major life events and see if they're the same planets and aspect in the event as in your natal chart. Remember, it won't be the same aspect. Probably, I mean, it may be, but it may not be the same aspect, but the two planets. Now, this is just an interesting site that I thought you might like to play around with. It gives all of the big planetary aspects. I mean, not all the planetary aspects, but the outer planetary aspects and cycles for many, many years. And I thought you just might like to take a look at that. The final thing, this is the title of an article, When Worlds Collide. And I'm going to have that in the study guide, so it will be accessible to you in the study guide. But it talks about the movement from the Piscean age to the Aquarian age. And that's also a theme. Now, speaking about broadening out, this is about as broad as we can get now. We've done the personal, we've done the family, we've done the collective at the moment you were born, and now we're doing the ages. So this is, we're in the midst of moving from the Piscean age to the Aquarian age. And I wanted you to read this, article just to see how well are you negotiating these two major world themes as we move from Pisces to Aquarius. And this is an excellent article. As I read it, it was interesting to me to kind of go back and forth and see where I'm still in the Piscean age with my beliefs or my attitudes, and then in other areas of life I'm in the Aquarian age, and how that's gone back and forth, and how I can see both in my life. So take a look at that, and I'd love for you to do some posting on that one as well. So happy hunting, and I'll see you on the posting board.